Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Motor City Mad Mouse Show. Am I loud enough, Kenny Albert? Glad to have you on.
Great to be with you, Scott.
And I'll tell you what, just let everybody know, this guy wrote a book, okay, A Mic for All Seasons. And, just to let everybody, and I'm just going to put it up there. All right. I wrote one too, but this guy has some unbelievable stories. I encourage everybody to go out there and get a copy of it. And by the way, it'll be a good opportunity for me to enhance my book, which I'm looking forward to you going out there, write the forward to it if you're interested in doing it, because I've known you a while. Let me give everybody an overview about what Kenny, how far we go back. We actually had an opportunity to meet for the first time over at the Amalie Arena for the NHL All-Star Game. And Kenny was really nice enough to give me a lot of time to talk. And you know what, we became friends since. And then we also had a chance to reconnect at the National Sports Media Association Awards weekend this summer. And it's just so glad that you and I are together at long last doing it. So I only know we have about 25 minutes, but we're going to make it as powerful as we can get. You're back from Seattle. I got a question for you. We know you covered a great game, but did you get to the Pike Street Market?
We did actually. Had lunch there with my producer, Fran Morrison, on Saturday. Always a great meal over at the market. We weren't staying too far from there, so it was a fun weekend in Seattle and a really exciting game to call yesterday.
Yeah, see, when I was covering the Seattle Seahawks, I had a chance to go to the Seattle Kingdom and had a chance to go there and did a lot of driving around there. Seattle's unquestionably a beautiful city. All right, Kenny, let's talk about your book. Obviously, I mentioned it, A Mic for All Seasons. Give everybody an overview what it's all about. And are you looking to reach students? And obviously, you have new media and social media. So what audience are you looking to reach?
Right. I think a wide variety, Scott. Definitely wanted to pay it forward. So there is a chapter towards the end, which I think high school and college broadcasting students will certainly be interested in. The book came out about a year ago. It was published by Triumph Books out of Chicago. It was a fun project. I know you've gone through it as well, but
right.
Really enjoyed writing the book. I did it myself, no ghostwriter. A lot of help from my family as far as editing and suggestions as far as stories and anecdotes that I should include. Started during the pandemic back in 2020 when we all had a lot of time on our hands. So I put together an outline and wrote a couple of sample chapters. Triumph signed on, and the entire process from start until it was actually published took about 2.5 years. But it's really a compilation of 3+ decades in the broadcasting business, calling so many different sports, stories about my childhood, working my first games during my high school years for Cox Cable on Long Island, first full-time job doing minor league hockey in Baltimore. And then there's a chapter devoted to each sport that I've called. There's a chapter on the 200+ color analysts that I've worked with. There's a chapter on travel stories and anecdotes, a chapter on the Olympics, a chapter on how we broadcasted games during the pandemic back in 2020 and 21, a chapter paying it forward, as I mentioned, a list of all the color commentators that I've worked with. So it's really a compilation of stories from the last 3 decades, and hopefully the viewers and listeners who have had a chance to read it have enjoyed it. And if you haven't had a chance to pick it up yet, hopefully you can in the future.
Why don't you let them know where they can pick it up, Kenny?
It's available in certain bookstores around the country, online, Amazon, triumphbooks.com, several other websites as well. If you go to a Google search and put in the title, should be able to find it pretty easily.
Listen, when you have guys like Wayne Gretzky and Walt Frazier doing the forward, that's pretty impressive. Let me tell you a quick story about Walt Frazier, though. I remember covering the Detroit Pistons as a beat writer all the time, and I can tell you, I talked to Walt Frazier so many times during the pre-media. He was one of the nicest, classiest people I've ever met. So for you to have him write a forward, I'm impressed anyway. But just thought I'd throw that out to you. Yeah, good choices on the forward, just like you're going to be a good choice when I put you on one of mine. All right. So anyway, so we're at the All-Star game. I had asked you a question. I'm going to ask you again. Okay, what sport is your favorite sport to broadcast?
Well, I'm so fortunate, Scott, to be involved in the 4 major sports in the United States on a regular basis. I've been the most associated with football and hockey for 30+ years, and also work several basketball and baseball games throughout the year. So Growing up, I loved them all. Hockey was my favorite, but the others were not too far behind, really. I loved them all as far as watching, broadcasting, practicing into a tape recorder. They're all so different. I call more hockey games than the other sports, obviously, due to the nature of the season, the length of the season. And it's a combination of radio with the New York Rangers and television on TNT. And then football, I've been with Fox for the last 31 years, over 500 games, which is incredible to think that it's gone that fast, number one, and B, that it's been that many games. There's nothing like the Stanley Cup playoffs, but there's also nothing like 1 o'clock on a Sunday when they kick off. So it's like comparing apples and oranges. Love them all. Really enjoy basketball and baseball as well. I've had the opportunity to do some boxing and at the Olympics, track and field, volleyball, water polo this past summer. So just very fortunate to be involved in a wide variety of sports.
Let's talk about the relationship you have with your dad. Obviously, you got your first tape recorder at 5 years of age. Everybody that knows about Marv Albert will realize he's a legendary broadcaster for sure. I enjoyed watching your dad all the time. He's the most versatile announcer I've ever seen. He thrived on boxing. I used to like watching him with Dr. Ferdy Pacheco and a lot of those. But let's talk about the influence, Kenny, about your dad and what he's meant in your career. Let's face the reality. When you have a father, it's always good to follow in their footsteps. But boy, you have a great father and you're able to have a great role model as well.
Right. It was certainly a great childhood. I always joke that when my uncles would come over, Al and Steve, who were also longtime broadcasters, it was like I was listening to the first all sports radio station when they would be sharing stories about the various games and players and coaches that they were covering. But I learned so much via osmosis just by watching him and the preparation that would go into each and every broadcast. I would go on road trips, attend so many games at Madison Square Garden with him. When I was old enough, I would start to keep stats. I would work as his statistician at Knicks, Rangers, NFL games. So really couldn't have asked for a better teacher. Just learned so much by growing up around it in the broadcast booth, watching the relationships between the play-by-play broadcaster and the color analyst, between the announcers and the production truck. Really just learned so much growing up in a sportscasting family.
All right, Kenny, put you on the spot, okay? What's the most difficult championship to win? NHL, NFL, you name it. If there's anything I'm missing, please let me know.
I think they're all tough. I mean, you look at the playoffs in hockey and basketball, it's 16 out of 30, 16 out of 32 in the NHL. So half the teams don't even make the playoffs. And in basketball, it's almost half the teams. Football, it's less teams, but it's such a grueling sport. You still have to go through 2 or 3 games just to get to the Super Bowl. So it's probably hard to say which one's the most difficult, but at the end of the year, only one team can win. Only one fan base goes home happy.
Okay, but what's the toughest playoffs to get through then? I've always been partial toward hockey. If you can win the Stanley Cup with that grueling sport, then my goodness, hoisting that Stanley Cup is pretty darn good stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at some of the injuries the players suffer throughout the playoffs. Wayne Gretzky and his Edmonton Oilers teammates have frequently told the story about when they lost to the New York Islanders in the 1983 Stanley Cup final.
Right. So,
and the Islanders had won 19 straight series. They won 4 straight Stanley Cups.
Right. So,
and the Oilers had to walk past their locker room on the way out, and they looked in and they saw, Dennis Potvin and Brian Trottier right on down the line with ice bags. And, they just looked exhausted. And the Oilers said they learned so much from that experience, just seeing what it took for the Islanders to win. And Edmonton wound up winning the next season and 4 of the next 5, but they learned a lot just from that one postcard view into the Islander locker room and what those players had gone through to attain their 4th consecutive championship.
Okay. I brought this up in Tampa. I'm going to bring it up again if I haven't already, although I don't believe I have. I'm going to ask you the same question. What's your favorite sport to broadcast?
Again, it's hard to answer. It's like asking which kid you like the best. I love, there's nothing like calling hockey playoffs, and there's nothing like calling NFL games. And I really enjoy basketball and baseball as well. So really fortunate to be involved in all of them.
Okay, well, it's a good answer. I mean, every sport has its challenges. I love baseball because of the chess match we play. One of my mentors is a guy I know you've heard of, Ernie Harwell. He's pretty good, isn't he? I mean, all he did is make the whole.
Oh, he was one of the best. There's such a difference calling hockey. It's a 60-minute flow.
Right.
It's the pace, the quickness, especially on the radio when you have to be so descriptive. Basketball is similar, but a little slower, but 48 minutes, the ball's in action. Football, as far as the play-by-play standpoint, it's the most rhythmic. It's one play and then it's 20 or 25 seconds. It's another play and then it's 20 or 25 seconds. Baseball, I've always said, has been the most challenging because there's so much downtime between pitches and between batters, but it's really been enhanced by the pitch clock. I think most broadcasters would tell you that the pitch clock has been huge as far as speeding up the pace of the game, and it now has a little bit of a hockey and basketball feel because there's so much less time in between pitches and batters.
Yeah, I've had a hard time adjusting to that rule. I understand it. Don Mattingly once told me, Kenny, because I have a good relationship with Don Mattingly, with the Marlins, he always told me, Scott, we could say we want to complain about the rules, but either way, we got to adapt them. We have to play by them. So go figure. So, all right. Well, you know what? Again, when it comes to my question, nobody answers them the best. So I'm going to do a little bit of name dropping here, Kenny. Okay. Name dropping on Kenny Albert. Many of the great broadcasters that broadcast local teams. I wonder if you ever heard of the guy named Jim Gordon of the Rangers. Do you remember Jim Gordon?
I used to watch him all the time as a kid doing Rangers hockey with the big whistle, Bill Chadwick, and he also did Giants football on the radio. So a lot of memories listening to Jim Gordon as a youngster for sure.
Yeah, I follow him. I go back a few years back. I don't know how many millennials will ever know unless you have a Google account. Jack and Joe Buck, St. Louis Cardinals. What are your thoughts?
Among the best of all time. Jack, one of the greatest baseball broadcasters of all time. First met Joe when we both had our initial auditions with Fox Sports back in 1994. We were both hired that year. Fox went with the two veteran crews, Pat Summerall and John Madden, Dick Stockton and Matt Millen. They decided to take a chance on some younger broadcasters, and Joe and I were fortunate to be part of that group. So also one of the best ever. 20-plus World Series, numerous Super Bowls. Always loved watching a game that Joe's calling. Had the great fortune to meet Jack a couple of times back in the late 90s. So just a terrific broadcasting family.
One of my favorite stories about Jack Buck, Kenny, was at Pompano Beach Municipal Stadium. I was working the scoreboard. That's what I did to have to pay my way through college, pick up odd jobs. And I'll never forget the time that Jack Buck takes a window out. He got hit by a foul ball. You could see the black and blue mark right on his arm. He comes up and said, that really hurt. But he had a great sense of humor. I shook his hand. It was really super nice to me. So it was pretty neat. And, God rest his soul. Vin Scully, Joe Davis, Los Angeles Dodgers.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to take a photo with Vin Scully, chatted with him for a couple of minutes during his last season with the Dodgers. I had never really had a conversation with him. I had seen him in numerous press rooms through the years if I were doing the game on Fox or one of the Fox cable channels. And Vin was obviously there working for the Dodgers, the greatest of all time to call baseball. And we had a great conversation. He grew up in New York, and I had read stories that he had been a Rangers hockey fan back in the 40s when he was in high school. So I asked him about it, and without missing a beat, he started naming 3 or 4 players who played for the Rangers in the 1940s, in that unique Vin Scully, style. So that was a fun conversation that I'll never forget. And there's actually a picture of the picture that we took together in my book. Joe Davis stepped right in. He's done an outstanding job replacing Vin with the Dodgers, and obviously does baseball in the World Series for Fox as well.
Kurt Gowdy, Dick Stockton. Obviously, we know about Stockton's famous home run, but Kurt Gowdy was a Red Sox announcer for many years. Some observations on them.
Right. Remember listening to Kurt Gowdy, just a little bit in the late 70s on the Game of the Week. Dick Stockton became a colleague and good friend. He was one of the original Fox NFL broadcasters hired in 94. So I would see Dick at the Fox seminar every year. And, I relay a story in my book that when Fox shuffled the football crews around a bit in 2007, and I wound up moving up the ladder to work with Darryl Johnston and Tony Siragusa, who had been Dick's partners previously. He left me the kindest message on a voicemail. I'll never forget it. And it was just a lesson in how to handle a situation like that. And he couldn't have been nicer with his words. And we still remain in touch to this day. So really learned a lot from being around Dick at the Fox NFL seminars for about 25 years. And just a classy gentleman, a Hall of Famer who's done it all. NBA Finals, World Series, football playoff games. He even did a couple of NHL games on Fox. So he's a member of the 4 Sport Club as well.
Okay, well, you know what? Tell you what, I remember the late Dan Kelly. Remember him, St. Louis Blues? But you know what's so ironic about that?
I knew Dan Kelly well, and his son John, who does a great job now with the St. Louis Blues as well.
You know, the irony about Dan Kelly, though, is he was in the same Pompano Beach Municipal Stadium booth with Jack Buck, and that game, and that's when I had a chance. Dan's a really good guy, and he's really iconic. All right, I got to ask you about your dad. He's one of your favorite announcers of all time. You can be partial if you want. After all, we all know how good the guy is anyways.
Right. No, you know, as I said earlier, couldn't have asked for a better teacher. Would try to watch or listen to every game. I was so fortunate growing up in the New York area. We had 9 professional teams in the 4 major sports. So I was a big radio listener. We didn't have cable until I was about 17, 18 years old. So, you know, I was listening to Jim Gordon, who you mentioned earlier, Sam Rosen on the Rangers. Howie Rose was a big influence. All of the baseball announcers. The Yankees had Phil Rizzuto, Frank Messer, and Bill White. With the Mets, it was Bob Murphy, Lindsey Nelson, and Ralph Kiner. Listened to Marty Glickman on Giants and Jets football. So I would take it all in on the radio. I would practice into my tape recorder, but I would always be listening to those great announcers that I just mentioned, no matter what the sport was.
You're amazing, Kenny. I always known that. So I don't know, maybe you're reading my mind across from where you're at, but I'm going to bring up Sam Rosen. So I have a question for you. Every person has a dream job. I once considered the Red Wings with Bruce Martin was calling the shots. Of course, I landed with Ernie Harwell, which wasn't bad. But let's talk about Sam Rosen for a moment. He's retiring from the New York Rangers. Would you ever yearn for the opportunity to be the play-by-play guy for the New York Rangers?
Well, I've been lucky enough. I have been for the last 29 years. I've been the radio play-by-play voice of the Rangers. Have worked with 3 great partners. Started off with Sal Red Light Messina, and then Brian Mullen and Dave Maloney. So many great memories calling Ranger games since 1995. And like I said, now in my 29th season with the Rangers. Sam's one of the greatest of all time. He's a Hockey Hall of Famer, won the Foster Hewitt Award, won the Lester Patrick Award this year. And just such a classy gentleman. Sam and I have sat next to each other on the team flights for the last 29 years, but was so fortunate to break in with the Baltimore Skipjacks of the American Hockey League. Had 2 great years there, just gaining invaluable experience. Did the Washington Capitals games on the television side for 3 years, along with Craig Laughlin on Home Team Sports, and then moved back to New York in '95 to call Rangers games. It's been an unbelievable 29 years at MSG Networks. I also fill in on Knicks games, about 15 a year on the TV side with Walt Clyde Frazier. So it's certainly been a dream to be the voice of the Rangers since 1995 on the radio side.
Okay, well, that's where you're leading me, okay? Thanks, Kenny. You're on the radio side. So would you ever yearn for that opportunity to do it on the TV side, knowing that Sam is probably retiring? We'll see if he retires with the Stanley Cup, since he had to call one with Mark Messier and company. Won't get into that. We don't have enough time. But would you yearn for the opportunity to be the Rangers play-by-play guy on the TV side?
Well, we'll see what happens. This year is all about Sam. We're celebrating Sam everywhere we go. I'm also so fortunate to call hockey on TNT with Eddie Olczyk and Brian Boucher on Wednesday nights. We called the Stanley Cup 2 years ago, the Vegas, Florida series. Also the Stanley Cup on NBC in 2021. So surrounded by great people, whether it's Eddie Olczyk and Brian Boucher on TNT, my partners Dave Maloney and Joe Micheletti on the Rangers side. So hockey season just getting into the swing. It's been a terrific first month, and our TNT crew will have the call of the Stanley Cup again this June. So can't wait for that as well. Okay,
rapid fire. We only have 5 minutes. I'm just going to make it rapid fire format. Okay, Kenny, and that's it. Brian Anderson, one of your colleagues, certainly one of the better broadcasters in there. He does everything. What are your thoughts of him?
Yeah, he does a terrific job, whether it's Brewers baseball, TNT baseball, college basketball, NBA. one of the most solid guys in the business and versatile.
Who do you feel is the best woman broadcaster of all time?
Well, it's hard to narrow it down. I mean, I've worked with some of the greats, whether it's Doris Burke on basketball. I've worked with Jess Mendoza on baseball, AJ Malesko on hockey. So I've been fortunate to work with those broadcasters who I mentioned. But, just like when you asked me about the different sports, it's really hard to choose one. There are so many great ones out there.
Okay. 3 more questions, Kenny. What broadcaster did you idolize growing up?
Well, I already mentioned my 3 family members, so they're certainly at the top of the list. But guys like Howie Rose and Doc Emmerich, Sam Rosen, Al Michaels, and then there are so many from this current generation. Really enjoy listening to Joe Buck and Ian Eagle and Mike Tirico, and I know I'm not naming everybody, I'm missing some, but all right, there's a lot of great ones out there. But I would put an Al Michaels right at the top of the list. What a tremendous career he's had. Doc Emmerich, I refer to Doc as the Vince Scully of hockey, and was so fortunate to be around Doc during the NHL and NBC days and the Olympics as well, calling Olympic hockey right next to Doc and NBC.
Great stuff. Okay, who do you enjoy working with the most? You talked about the different commentators you work with. Are there any particular ones that stand out in your mind?
I enjoy them all. I've worked with over 200 of them, and like I said, the list is in my book. But when I think about the games that I worked with Tim McCarver and Troy Aikman and John Davidson, some of the best ever in their respective sports, and my current full-time partners, Eddie Olczyk, Brian Boucher, Dave Maloney, Clyde Frazier, Jonathan Vilma. But there are just too many to name. And I've worked with Hall of Famers, champions in all the different sports. I think I've worked with 12 or 13 football Hall of Famers, from Terry Bradshaw, Howie Long, right on down, Joe Namath, Terrell Davis, Rondé Barber, Anthony Munoz. And again, I'm forgetting some, but just so fortunate to work with so many tremendous analysts and people.
Okay. I set you up that way just so that people have to get your book. So I didn't expect you to go out there and read 200 of them. No way. Been at this way too long. Got to get the Cots Picking book, folks. Candy, put it up on the screen. Mike for all seasons. All right. God, put it up there. There we go. If she doesn't, and she will, I'll do it. That's all right. There you go. All right. So with that said, top 5 events you've ever covered. And then I'll get you out of here on this last one.
Well, I mentioned many of them in the book, but, again, hard to narrow it down to 1 or even 5. But having the opportunity to call numerous Stanley Cups on the TV and radio side. The first one was in '94 when the Rangers beat Vancouver. I was working for NHL Radio, national radio broadcast, so that's certainly up there. Hockey, the Stanley Cup Finals, I've talked about. The Olympics, the women's gold medal game in Pyeongchang in 2018. Baseball, the one that I get asked the most about is the Bautista home run and bat flip, the Blue Jays Rangers playoff game in 2015. I was on the call for that one. Football, 5 divisional playoff games. The most memorable was probably the Saints and the 49ers back in 2012, 4 touchdowns in the last 4 minutes. Drew Brees and Alex Smith going back and forth. Vernon Davis, the game-winning touchdown. Worked Super Bowl 46, the international world feed, Giants and Patriots. And then there are so many moments from football games. I called the game when Terrell Owens stomped on the Cowboys star when he was playing for the 49ers. Wow. I had the game just 2 years ago, the Vegas, the Raiders and the Patriots, the laterals at the end of the game, the Chandler Jones interception. So I list all of them in the book, but those are just some of the ones that stand out.
There you go. We'll get you on there on this note. I go about 30 seconds with it. Red Wings won 11 Stanley Cups. Florida Panthers got there first. And the first time that I ever saw Jim Gordon and Dan Kelly together was back in 1972 when the Montreal Canadiens took on the Chicago Blackhawks. And right then and there, and that was on CBS, people. Okay, just so you know. So I want to make sure I got those facts in there. But meanwhile, Kenny Albert, I can't thank you very much for coming on the Motor City Mad Mo show. It's really been a pleasure talking to you. I hope we get an opportunity to talk down the line, but I know that you have a busy schedule ahead of you, and I can't, once again, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to putting you in my next book, and you're a great friend, and I can't thank you enough for everything that you're all about, buddy. So,
well, thanks, Scott. I really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you again down the line, and best of luck to you as well.
well, no problem. Well, you know one thing, I'll be texting you with updates, and we'll be talking. But thanks for coming on today, Kenny. You're the best. You're iconic in my mind, not only as a broadcaster but a friend. Thanks, Scott.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.